Don't watch this video. Don't watch this video if you have not played The Last of Us. Just do yourself a favor. Buy the game, play the game, beat the game, and then finally watch this video. But if you guys have played The Last of Us and you guys don't mind spoilers, then feel free to watch. So anyways, spoilers, where do I begin? This game achieves in telling such a captivating story that you don't want to ruin for anybody, you just want to tell them to go play the game. But for those people who have played the game and you have friends that have played and beaten the game and know what the story is all about, then you can't help but engage yourself in very intricate conversations with them saying, oh, this character did this for this specific reason and they did this because they wanted to do this, and it just makes for great coffee table conversations. Let's start off with the big reveal that is about 2 or so hours into the game. Ellie is infected, but guess what? Her cordyceps or whatever the hell they were talking about have mutated to make her immune. So what do you do with the immune girl that is immune to the thing that wiped out the entire civilization of our planet? Stick a probe in her and try to figure out a cure. And the fact that they decided to take this story element of Ellie being infected but immune to the disease is used not necessarily as a piece of information for the world that they created in this game, but more as a tool to give a reason for these two characters to be together, for Joel to be a little more humanized, saying, hey, there's actually some hope of this thing finally ending, the fact that there might be a cure because this girl is immune. Maybe it can happen. And it just gives a whole better reason for these characters to develop and to grow up on each other and build this relationship that us as gamers are going to care about. And this relationship is built up over a long time, at least long in the context of the story of the game. I mean, when it says summer right there, I was honestly thinking that it was going to jump from one extreme, quote-unquote, extreme weather condition to another. I thought it was going to start off in the summer and then transition on to the winter, because I know for a fact that there's going to be a winter stage in the story of the game, because we've seen that in the commercials and in the trailers and in some of the gameplay footage that you have, Ellie out in the wilderness during the winter time trying to hunt down animals with a bow and arrow. So I knew that it was going to transgress from the summer to the winter, but I didn't know that they were actually going to include fall and spring. And so there you go, you have a full year of these two characters getting to know one another and to genuinely care for each other. Now, this is just nitpicking, and honestly this is just nothing but just wishful thinking, is that part of me, and a really small part of me, was hoping that some of these seasons were as long as summer, because summer is the longest season, and for good reason, because summer always feels like an eternity, especially here in the high desert. But I would have preferred to have spent just a little more time during the fall, during the winter, especially during the winter, because I thought that they could have played an awful lot of they could have played off the harsh elements, such as the winter storms. I mean, some of those, storms and the way that they're rendered, like I said in my review, they're very next gen. And they could have used that to build some more tension with other, things that could have happened in the story, but they went straight for David being this sociopath that is out for Ellie, because she and Joel killed some of his men, and I'll get to him in a second. But they could have used a little more in the winter setting, but unfortunately we spend a really brief amount of time, and it isn't until spring where they changed the setting, but it's not about the setting, it's about the climax, it's about actually finding the fireflies, so it gets by on that. But I wish we could have spent a little more time during the fall and winter seasons, because they just breezed on really quickly. And like I said in my review, this game becomes a bit of a character study, because it puts to the side, especially during the summer and fall seasons, it pushes the story a little bit to the side and just focuses on these characters. And, from Joel is not entirely like a hardened badass at the beginning of this whole thing. I mean, he's a little bit scarred, and because he's scarred, he's going to be a little edgy and antagonizing towards other people. But with this girl, Ellie, it's right from the get-go, he could tell that she reminds him of his daughter from 20 years ago. And he's not as antagonizing with her as he is with other people. He still is, but not to the extent as he is with others that are around him, even Tess. But as the story progresses, you study these characters a lot more. You try to figure out where they're coming from. You learn more about them. Joel becomes attached to her and cares for her deeply, to the point where he does things that you go, I don't feel comfortable that he did this since I'm playing as that character. But at the same time, you're left with no other choice. That scene at the end, we have to walk in on Ellie, who's hooked up to all these tubes. I mean, when he walks in and I see Ellie just like he is, I had the same expression on my face and I said the exact same thing that he did. Oh shit. What happens afterwards is probably one of the most disturbing moments in the game. One of those moments that even though it didn't make me cry, it made me feel emotionally disturbed inside, because in order for Joel to sneak out of this place with Ellie, he is forced to kill these these unarmed innocent doctors who were given nothing but a job to just operate on Ellie. And Joel comes in here, and me as as the character Joel controlling him, I have to kill these doctors, and was probably the most brutal way. And having to kill these doctors just made me just very uncomfortable. But at the same time, I'm supposed to do that because, of course, within the logic of The Last of Us, I can't leave these doctors alone. They're going to go and contact the Fireflies if I let them go, so I'm forced to kill them. And it isn't until I kill them that I'm able to go up to Ellie, press the triangle button, and be able to pick her up. That was one of those moments that just made me go, game, why are you making me do this? Why? And then after that, there's another moment that made me feel a little emotional and choked up inside. And that is the segment where you have to carry Ellie down those hallways, trying to avoid all the gunfire from the Fireflies. Because obviously when you're carrying Ellie, you can't use your firearms or your melee weapons or anything. You're forced to run. And that scene, that little gameplay segment, because it's not even a cutscene, it's actually part of the gameplay, which again helps in the immersion of the game. It's one of the things that is so strong about this game. It's damn near beautiful. It's immersion. But the fact that it's part of the gameplay, it made me feel emotional for two reasons. One, it's just the way it's presented. The music, the lighting, the flashes and everything. Joel trying to talk to Ellie while she's unconscious, like hold on or something like that, and trying to run. And what made it even worse is that once or twice, I think it was just once. I failed once during this gameplay segment, and that's something that I didn't comment in my review, is that some of the death animations in this game are traumatic. I mean, they get up close and personal, and they show Joel either getting shot up in the head or getting torn apart by a clicker or even a bloater. The bloater's the worst. He's tearing his mouth open. So the death animations in this game are just as disturbing. But aside from that, the other reason why I felt like this gameplay scene made me feel choked up inside is because this serves as an artistic mirror to what Joel was actually doing in the prologue of the game, where he was carrying Sarah to safety away from all these infected people, as well as all these people who are running, and the whole city's going up in flames and everything. I liked that was a bit of a mirror. Like, he's doing this thing again. He's repeating history, only this time it's his grand opportunity to not fail. And sure enough, he doesn't fail, but at what cost? He guns down Marlene in cold blood. I mean, he doesn't even try to negotiate her. He just flat out says, "You're just gonna come after her." Boom. My jaw dropped to the floor. It was actually the second time in the entire game that I went, no! Not because I necessarily cared for Marlene. I mean, she was hardly in the game. She was only at the beginning and here at the end. And there was some slight amount of logic to what she was saying about how there's this possible cure, and the only way to find this cure is to sacrifice Ellie, and this is what she would want, and this is what everybody would want, even Joel himself would want. And of course, Joel's not buying that bullshit. But it was disturbing because Joel just flat out killed in cold blood. Him killing Marlene just like that, without thinking of it twice, made me think of Rick from The Walking Dead. And more specifically, Rick during Season 3, where he's just flat out killing people because he instantly sees them as a threat. And to see that evolution of a character to how he was in Season 1, where, he was very precautious, he was like, we need order and everything, and then in Season 3, this is a dictatorship. Joel is starting to take that similar arc, and what he does later at the very, very end of the game, where he swears to Ellie and saying that, yeah, what I said about the Fireflies, about them finding other people to test on because there's others that are immune like Ellie, just makes, like I said, the game more of a character study and trying to figure out, why did Joel do that? And while we're on that subject, the fact that the game literally cuts to black right after Ellie is content with his answer, it says, okay, let's move on. I'm gonna admit, when I first saw this, the scene cut to black and then the credits start rolling, my first reaction was, what the fuck? It just left me at the edge of my seat, and to just see the credits roll, I'm like, no, please give us a little more. But then as the credits rolled, I thought to myself, okay, this is what they want. This is what I was talking about in my review, that every time I played this game, it felt like an episodic story. It felt like I was watching a genuine show that had me captivated with its story and its characters, and much like Season 1 of The Walking Dead. And here, Naughty Dog is trying to say, yeah, that is precisely the tone and the atmosphere that we're going for. So now we're going to be a little more true to what we are going for and leave you hanging with a cliffhanger. But at the same time, have you speculate as to why he said that while we're working on as to why we really are, why he really did say that. Because if you guys haven't heard, The Last of Us 2 and The Last of Us 3 website domain names have been registered by Naughty Dog. Now that doesn't guarantee The Last of Us 2 is happening. But, it's one of those things where they reserve the name just in case, but for the time being, they're working on their current project, or whatever that project may be. I'm pretty sure it's not The Last of Us related, even though they do have some DLC coming our way, but, their official next project is probably, more than likely not going to be The Last of Us or Uncharted, for that matter. Actually, it might be Uncharted. Uncharted 4, PlayStation 4. Maybe. But surely they are not going to start The Last of Us 2 anytime soon. But it is, them saying it might happen, it might not happen. But for now, just in case, we are going to register these names. And seeing as it ended the way it did, I can totally see The Last of Us 2 exploring, some of these story elements, rather than exploring to see how many, kinds of zombies and kind of infected they could throw at us and make it, bigger and more, more disastrous and more depressing as it was. They could just focus on these story elements further and branch them out into something that we can be captivated by, like we were with this first game. But for now, we are satisfied with the development that we're given in this game, because it is outstanding, like I said before. And even some of the supporting characters that aren't in the game for too long, even they have some sort of arc or some sort of development or some sort of backstory that helps you understand what other people, aside from Joel and Ellie, who are our main characters, and we have to spend the entire game with these characters, we have all these other people who also went through some tough shit, after the world went to hell. You're introduced to these two characters named Henry and Sam that are very much replicants of you. You got the older male and then the younger adolescent. And they, had to do some things to survive, but at the same time, they mostly spent most of their time trying to run away and that sort of thing. And like I said, some of the small things that they were mentioning when they were going through the suburbs just makes you, think about what it was prior to the pandemic for these characters, and then how is it that they have survived this long, 20 years later. How did they survive? And speaking of Henry and Sam, there's a really good chance that Sam was also born into this world, so he's very much robbed of this childhood just as much as Ellie was. And I thought that their pairing was just, awesome, and, it just made me smile, especially when they were, doing things in the background during the actual gameplay segments rather than the cutscenes, like they're playing darts with each other and being all competitive and everything, and it's just, it makes you happy. And then what happens later makes you feel so fucking depressed, because that's actually one of the moments that made the first moment that made me drop my jaw in just utter shock. I was just like, what? That is when Sam turns. Now, I'll admit, Sam turning, I'm not gonna say it's predictable, but there were, hints that made me go, he's bit. You're trying to fight off clickers, and a couple of clickers attack Henry and Sam, and you manage to take them out with your sniper. And then later on, when Henry asks Sam, "Are you okay?" and Sam's just like, "Yeah, I'm fine." The expression on his face instantly made me go, "No, you're bit." And sure enough, later when Ellie comes in, trying to console him, trying to say, "Hey, look, I got you the toy that you wanted," and he just throws it to the ground, and I'm like, you're dead, aren't you? And sure enough, he picks up his pen. He's got what looks more like a scrape rather than a bite, but it's a cut nonetheless, and I'm pretty sure it's infectious. The next morning, Ellie walks in. Sam is going all, and I'll admit, when I hear his, his moans and that noise he's making is very eerie. And he bursts in through the door. He's trying to eat her. Henry, is stuck in this predicament where should he kill his brother right there and then, or what should he do? And of course, instantly, he kills him. And I thought it was going to lead to that, heartfelt moment where Henry's like, my brother's dead and everything. And, and Joel and Ellie try to console him. And then it cuts to him going away on his own. Similar to, spoilers, similar to how Morgan dealt with the death of Dwayne in Season 3. Of course, we don't actually see it. He just tells it through his story. But the way Dwayne is reacting and coping with the death of his son from a while ago in what is arguably the best episode of Season 3 from The Walking Dead was clear. That episode with Morgan's return, I thought it was great. And I thought it was going to lead into that. But holy shit! No! what does Naughty Dog decide to do? Naughty Dog decides to say, hey David, guess what? I'm gonna traumatize you for the night. I'm gonna make you think about this character who was, the night before, he was talking about riding motorbikes and having the time of his life during the summer or something like that. I'm gonna take this character that was just so well the night before, and I'm gonna put a bullet through his head. He doesn't know how to react to how his brother just died, and so what does he do? He puts the gun on himself and kills himself right there and then. And it was the big what moment for me. I mean, a little more than later on when Joel kills Marlene and I have to deal with killing those doctors and escaping the hospital and whatnot. This was the pinnacle what the fuck moment for me. And I just couldn't let it go. I was resting in my bed just going, he killed himself. Why? I mean, I know it hurts, but I'm just gonna stop talking about it, because the more I talk about it, the more I'm gonna think back to it, and the more tempted I'm gonna be, to play the game. But before I close out, I do want to comment on the character that I was talking about that Nolan North played in this game. He plays the character David, who is introduced during the winter segment of the game. And like I said before, even some of the tiny supporting characters, well, not tiny, but the smaller supporting characters in this game even have some development. David, at first I thought he was going to be an ally to Joel and Ellie, but in the mere moments that he's in this game, he goes from, somebody who looked like a kind-hearted, mild-mannered man to, a potential Hannibal Lecter. And like I said, he's literally in like, what, 3-4 scenes in their entirety, with a gameplay segment where you have to sneak around him and attack him. And of course, you have to dodge the glass plates that are on the porcelain plates that are on the ground, or else you'll be making noise. And if you make noise, he gets, he's like, he figures it's like a Metal Gear Solid segment during the gameplay of that bit. And not only was that gameplay segment so intense, I was never so at the edge of my seat playing a game in a long time, possibly ever, as that bit when I was trying to sneak by David and trying to attack him with my itty bitty knife that Ellie's always carrying around. But not only was it intense, but like I said, David was probably one of the best villains that we've had in video games in recent memory, and he's literally in it. He's definitely a Hannibal Lecter, just like in Silence of the Lambs. Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter is literally in the movie for only 16 minutes, yet he wins an Oscar and he becomes one of the most iconic movie villains of our time. And David is no exception. He is one of the best villains that I've seen in a while, and like I said, in only a matter of scenes, he goes from being this normal guy to being creepy as hell, and at the same time as intimidating as any other villain that we've had in other games, whether they be games, action games, or adventure games, or even post-apocalyptic games. This is the way to develop a villain. One that you feel like you can trust at first, and as he goes on, you figure out that this guy is not right in the head. But the way he goes about it makes it seem like he feels justified. When he was telling the other guy to put the gun down, I'm like, okay, obviously you got some beef with us because we killed your man, Joe and Ellie. Joe and Ellie, me, Ellie, because we're playing as Ellie at this point. So I'm just gonna sneak by. But then the fact that he sends out his men to track me down just made me go, okay, this guy is some serious shit. And if there's one other thing that I was glad about David, it's the fact that they stuck him in the winter section, where not only was Joel handicapped from that huge rod that was sticking out of his side there, that was intense, but being the fact that it's winter and that it's cold and it's very depressing, even more depressing than it was before, and just it's the harshest environment that Joel and Ellie have been in, especially from the fact that Joel is injured. Adding this villain just made the intensity of the story and the intensity of the gameplay and the game itself all the more intense, and just made it a better experience. And last but not least, speaking of experiences, I'm going to go ahead and comment about that bit that I told you about in my review, where I said that I never felt a higher, a rush of adrenaline pumping through me than in this gameplay segment. And that was the bit where you're separated from Ellie via the elevator shaft, and you have to turn on this generator in order to turn on a door that is only activated by a card. And the fact that when you turn on the generator, it attracts, obviously because of the noise that it's generating. Haha, see what I did there? Because of the noise that it's generating, it attracts not only some runners, but a bloater. And the fact that you can't kill this bloater because you have limited weaponry, the weaponry that you have is not particularly strong, and the fact that you don't have Bill this time, because the first time that you encounter a bloater, you have Bill by your side to be able to, shoot some more rounds into it while you're doing so as well. And on top of that, you were, what was it, like a cafeteria or like a basketball court or something like that? I can't remember where they were in, but it was a very large open space, so you were able to outrun this thing. And here, the corridors are so narrow, and the fact that the bloater is so many times stronger than you are, you're left with no other choice than to just run past the bloater. I was just like, yeah, he was right away right there. He could just smack me and just start cutting open my mouth. So I was forced to just run by him, and run up to the door. And of course, the fact that this door will not open unless I slide the card just made it all the more intense. Part of me kind of wishes that this game was filled with many, many more moments like that, and to just make me feel more at the edge of my seat and just frightened as hell. But the fact that they're so very scarce and there's not many of them just makes those experiences scarier. But anyways, you guys already know what I thought about the game as a whole. It's absolutely amazing. It's practically a masterpiece. At first, I felt the need to nitpick and to hold back on my rating because of the tiny little glitches. Somebody recently mentioned a glitch about how sometimes the people that you're with, whether it be Ellie or Bill or Tess or whoever's there, sometimes they would pop out from underneath cover, and the enemy, not necessarily the runners or the infected, but hunters would look at her or him and not detect them, but when they looked at me, they did detect them. I'll admit that happened once or twice in this game, but not as much as some critics are making it out to be, because they're making it out to be like this game is so full of glitches. It literally happens like once or twice in the entire game. And right away when it does happen, the character would then duck underneath cover almost to make it seem like it was a close call. So it's not as glitchy or as buggy as some critics are making it out to be. Polygon. And I must reiterate, this is an absolutely amazing experience, and it's probably the best kind of swan song that the PS3 can deliver as we transition on to the PlayStation 4 era. And just I can tell you this, Naughty Dog developing a game where you technically play as just one character. You're just controlling one character at a time, whether it be Joel or Ellie, because there are segments where you play as Ellie, especially during the winter. But for the most part, you're playing as Joel. But the fact that even though you're only playing as Joel, but in the end you feel like you're playing as both characters at the exact same time, and you're living through this experience as both characters, it's something that cannot be mastered just easily, and it's probably going to happen only once in every generation. And I believe with this game, with The Last of Us, it is that one time for this generation. It's probably going to take a while to come across an experience like this for the PlayStation 4 or even the Xbox One for that matter. And with that, I end my spoiler video. Thank you guys for watching. Obviously you have played The Last of Us if you're watching this video, so let me know what you guys thought of not only the game and the gameplay and the multiplayer and the presentational values and everything and all that crap, but also let me know what you guys thought of some of the spoilers that I didn't mention in this video. And since this is a spoiler video, feel free to go nuts on the comment section, but of course, fair warning, spoiler.